right, not only was this season, the 2022 in Nebraska season, significant because Scott Frost hasn't made a bowl game yet, on the hot seat, whatever you may want to say it, but he went out and made a bunch of staff changes, and he overhauled the offensive staff, and it's going to have a big impact on this year. And so as part 3 of my Husker season preview, I wanted to take a look at how these coaching hires, how they're going to impact this team. And I think most people, they think the coaching hires, the first 2 that they're thinking about are offensive coordinator Mark Whipple and special teams coordinator Bill Bush. And if we look at the offensive staff first, and bringing in Mark Whipple, I really liked the move. He wasn't a guy that was on my radar. Heck, I probably thought he was going to stay at Pitt. And when I did a video on potential offensive coordinators, he wasn't even a guy that I mentioned. But I really liked the move. At Pitt, Mark Whipple developed one of the best offenses in the nation, and to do it at Pitt, I think was pretty remarkable. You think of high-octane offenses, you probably think of like Alabama and maybe some of those Big 12 schools. And I think bringing in Whipple to the staff was crucial because there was a lot of things that Nebraska had under Frost. This past year, I really enjoyed and really liked the running game that Scott Frost had. Using more of an option look, bringing in those receivers, I thought that was unique, and I thought that really could be a good offense moving forward. Now, so you bring in Whipple, who's more of that pro style, and he's still going to, and I thought that was going to help because I think the biggest reason that I struggled with Frost is there was no identity on offense. It seemed that he just wanted to go out and recruit the sweetest players that he could, and it was just a mismatch, and he was just trying to do this, trying to do that, and it just didn't really seem like it fit. And so I was excited when they brought in Whipple that he was going to have more of a pro-style scheme, per se, pro-style spread, and I thought that was a good fit for what Nebraska wanted to do, and then it gave them some direction. With Whipple having his established system, he was going to be able to develop that system, and then Nebraska could recruit to it. Now, we see and we've heard that it's going to be Whipple's passing attack, his passing game concepts, mixed with Nebraska's current running game concepts. And I think that's my biggest hesitation. Just because if Frost would have said, okay, I want to be the CEO head coach, Mark Whipple, I'm hiring you to be the offensive coordinator, run your system, I would have been happy. But the fact that we have Frost saying, oh, you run your system, except for the run game, run my system. And I in theory, that sounds good because you got a good passing attack with a unique rushing attack. But is that going to be the best thing for this team? And I worry, is Scott Frost going to meddle too much in this offense? Is his itch, his history, his experience calling plays, is he going to meddle too much in the offense instead of just letting Mark Whipple go? I think that's my biggest hesitation. Because if he just lets Whipple go, I think this offense can really take that next step. All right, sticking with the offense, let's look at the 2 position coaches that they hired. Brian Applewhite at running backs coach, and then Raiola along the offensive line. I like bringing in – I understand they had to make the change at running back. Ryan Held was more of a recruiting guy, and he got some highly rated recruits in, but I think the running back position is not what Nebraska has wanted the last few years. There was a lot of turnover. There was not much as development. You always kept saying, who's going to be, Nebraska hasn't had a feature running back since Divine Ozigbo. And a lot of people put that blame on Ryan Held of not developing these guys, not developing a rotation. I mean, last year it was Gabe Irvin. He was going to be the running back, and then obviously he gets hurt. And then they go with Morrison and a couple other guys. And then all of a sudden, boom, Ramir Johnson starts one game, plays well. And then all of a sudden Yant comes out of nowhere. And it just didn't seem, it was just kind of like surprise after surprise. And I think having an established running backs coach in Brian Applewhite, I'm looking forward to seeing maybe can they develop a better rotation, kind of not necessarily do a bell cow back, 'cause they're going to do a running back by committee, but just can they develop that go-to guy that's like, hey, Nebraska needs to win this game. We're going to rely on this guy. And I don't feel like they've had that. I really like Ramir Johnson. I think he's a really good player, an ascending player. I'll be curious to see. You don't hear a lot of talk out of him in camp and that, so we'll kind of see where he is. Offensive line, I think it's just going to be wait and see. Just because, Royal's not one to talk. I know I really like that they moved Cochran inside to left guard. I think that's going to be his best position. Hopefully, Bryce Benhart is a guy that has had a lot of potential, hasn't really played well lately, so be curious to see if Royal can get the most out of him. And then finally wrapping up the offensive staff, I forgot to mention earlier, Mickey Joseph was a big-time hire. His time at LSU, working with guys like Jamar Chase and Terrence Marshall and Justin Jefferson, just coaching those guys says something. And a lot of people were a little worried when Mickey Joseph said, I'm not a good wide receiver coach. I get the talent and turn those guys loose. And I think that was just kind of him just talking. But and I don't think anyone's going to associate him with being the best wide receiver developer. But if he can, what I want out of him, and I think he's going to bring to the staff, is I think he's going to be that motivator. And Nebraska's receivers have underachieved. Yes, Toure came in and had a good year last year, but they, I think, really too much Nebraska's top rated receivers couldn't see the field. And we kept seeing walk-ons. We kept seeing some of these transfers come in. If what I want, and I'm hopeful that Mickey Joseph can bring, is he could be a guy that gets our talent on the field, gets them ready, gets them working to get them on the field. And nothing wrong about some of those other guys, but when our best, guys would come in, and make a play, and then you wouldn't see them for a while. But then we'd see some of these, these walk-ons, and some of these other guys come in and get significant minutes, and you're like, our talent's sitting on the bench. So that's what I'm hopeful for Mickey Joseph, that he can get the talent off the bench and making big plays for the Huskers. All right, so now that I talked about the offense, special teams has got to be the next thing that most people want to talk about. And I know there's some hesitation about Bill Bush. He was on our staff last year. Special teams was a mess. Why wasn't he elevated at the end of the season when they let go of the offensive staff to kind of rejuvenate the special teams? I mean, I don't put much emphasis on that. They had to finish out the season. They had to get that offense ready to go. But I think having a guy like Bill Bush as a designated special teams only coach, I think is huge for this program. We've seen that special teams has caused a lot of issues and lost some games. And I think having a guy who's not only a really good recruiter as a special teams coordinator, but we see this emphasis. He's already gone out and gotten a new punter and a kicker, guys that have competed at the lower levels and had a lot of success. And I just think someone, even if, it's just having someone sitting there and focused on this, is going to really improve the team, because that's their focus. And so maybe they don't prove and they're the number one special teams units in the nation, but getting that improvement, getting that focus, that emphasis on it, and they've talked about it. They've talked how much special teams is important. That's a big change from previous years. But then you see a lot of these other coaches buying in. I remember Mickey Joseph, when he first got here, said, my receivers, you got to play special teams because you're going to play it in the NFL. And I think that emphasis and getting some of those coaches who buy into how important special teams are is going to be extremely important. I think and then just having that person to be able to go through and identify defensive backs and receivers and running backs, linebackers, all these guys, and say, these are the guys that I want on special teams, is going to help out this program. And then the last coach that I want to talk about isn't a new coach, but it is coaching in a new position, and that is Mike Dawson taking over the entire defensive line. Early on in the Frost tenure, they were a 3-4 base team. 3 down linemen, 4 linebackers, and they kind of stuck to that. And so having a defensive line coach and then an outside linebackers coach made some sense. But as we've seen this past year, Nebraska's morphed into more of a 4-man front, an even front. And basically what they did is instead of taking 3 down linemen, there's 2, and then they just walk their outside linebackers up to defensive ends. But it's basically a 4-2-5 as they run, the old peso that Bo Pelini ran. And so it makes sense that you have one coach coaching all those guys because it's just those 4. And I think Dawson's experience both coaching the D-line when the Frost first came, and then now coaching the outside linebackers this past year, I mean, it just gives him that success. I think it just allows him to have more of a united message. Not that the last, they didn't before, but just having 4 guys working together on a more consistent basis with the same message coming, I think it will only help. And it was a unit that wasn't bad, but I think getting O'Shawn Mathis and getting some of those other transfers, I think is going to be a big help. So I'm a big fan of the additions that Scott Frost made. I just can't wait to see how they all come together, the changes that we'll see. The offense is going to look a lot different than it was last year, but I think that's in a good way. It'll be curious to see how well special teams play, what the difference is there, and I think that's a big help in getting Nebraska, I think, over that hump, getting them back to a bowl game, and then we'll go ahead and see from there. Are they barely a bowl team, or are they a team that is going to surprise a lot of people? And you're starting to see a lot of analysts and college football experts starting to pick Nebraska as a sleeper team, a team to kind of watch. And I think getting these coaching additions is a big reason for that.